Hello and welcome once more to a video by Synced Stories, and I'm Chris. And today we're going to talk about auto flatting with Krita. How to produce your color flats with Krita, and this is part 1. And in this part I'm actually not going to use show Krita in action for the production of the flats, but only as a help, only as a sort of display tool to when I'm taking my notes here for to make it easier for you to see or to remember what I'm saying. So what I am going to do is we're going to talk about the 6 or 7 main points that we need to understand when we are preparing our line art work for Krita. So this is a crucial step, because it's not that you can just take your line work and sort of toss it into Krita and push a button and think that everything will be nicely produced color flats. No, you most probably always need to do a little preparatory work. So I'm going to show you what I do, and then you can decide if you need to do that yourself. And then after I've talked about these points, I'm actually going to replicate what I'm doing in Photoshop. I'm going to show you in Photoshop exactly what I'm doing, and so that you can get a better idea of what you might be doing if you decide to choose this process. But before we start, as I usually do, just a quick advertisement here for the upcoming science fiction action thriller adventure. This comic book, full color 40-page color book album with Barry Riley here, as you can see in the on the front cover. And so this is the project underway. And now, well, and then perhaps I can just show you the there's a back cover here also. That's with all the, so there are 8 volumes, 8 books, 8 printed books in store, or well, not in store but planned. And 987 degrees centigrade is just the first one out of these 8, and all of these 8 together comprise season 1 of the Unlimited Danger series. Okay, so that's enough advertisement. Let's go back to the auto flatting with Krita. So what I'm going to do here is just simply to write, if I have some good colors perhaps, if it works, it doesn't work. It seems that okay, so let's not do that in Krita then. Let's do it in Photoshop. I'm not so used actually messing around with Krita for anything else than producing my flats, so you have to excuse me there. So let's just make a new document in Photoshop instead and use that as the my so-called notes. So we can perhaps make it a little bigger just so that you can see better. Let's increase that one, and we have, let's just call that white here, and we just duplicate a few times to get we have some layers here. Okay, and then the first layer down here is the workflow. So I'm going to just take a brush and let's see if we can just take a more distinct brush perhaps. Less maybe. Well, we'll just take this one here and make it black, and we will like that. So we have maybe a little wider, so we'll just write workflow here nicely. Workflow. So the basic workflow we are trying to, what we want to do, or what I want to do, maybe you want to do that as well, but what I want to do is to start in Photoshop for all my line art, and then I want to go to Krita externally to make my flats, and then I want to return to Photoshop again as soon as possible. So this is the sort of basic workflow in terms of which programs I'm going to use. So this is number one here. So what we're looking at in this video then is this part. How should I prepare my line art in such a way? How should I prepare it in order for Krita to very quickly execute the production of the color flats? So that is what we're doing in this video. So then what we always do, or what I always do, is that I start with my line art. So in the panel in question, I'm drawing my characters, my background, my and everything like that. I'm preparing my line art as I want it to be on the final page, right? So, and whether that line art is like Tintin style, if I express myself like that, Tintin style, very clean connected lines, clean connected, or if I do, I don't know, some modern sort of like extremely sketchy kind of comics where you don't have connected clean lines, but rather unconnected. And my own UD11, the 987 degrees centigrade, my whole style is in that sense like modern, because I use a lot of unconnected lines. So this, I say, is more time consuming to prepare for the this workflow here, because you have to somehow or other clean that up, or make the lines better, and I'll explain more about this. So that's two types of line art, and each of these require different. This one up here requires less steps to prepare, and the number two here, the modern one with the unconnected lines, is a little bit more time consuming to prepare. Okay, so that's the basic. So what I'm proposing we have to do always, if we're going to use this method, is to, within Photoshop, we have to copy the line art layer to something which I call X-flats line art. So it's also line art, but it's not dedicated to showing what's in the panel like in black and white, but it's simply line art for the future production of X-flats. And X-flats is the name I've given my flats. Why is that? Because I produce my flats externally. The letter X stands for external, so my external flats are produced in Krita. That's the idea. And before I go to Krita, I must remake the line art, fix my line art in various ways to be sure that that Krita actually produces result that I'm perfectly happy with. So I don't want to take any chances, because the whole idea is that the Krita step must be quick. I don't want to mess around too much in Krita. I just want to go there, I want to press one button, and 10 seconds later I want to have my finished X-flats. So that's the plan. Now, okay, so let's talk about what happens after I have copied the line art. What things must I do then? And before I talk about that, I want to talk about steps or individual things we have to do, and then we will show the process in real time, what I'm doing. So number one, what we should have is we always must have a frame, and well, I mean, you could skip it, but still it's easier, I think, to always have a frame, a special frame for dedicated X-flats work. So we're going to do that here. So we have so point number one would be, whoops, what did I do here? Okay, maybe did I, well, let's use this color anyway. What I did was I was talking about the frame here, and the frame there are two types of frames. There is the final frame, or the finished panel frame, which is the frame you see in your comic book, and then there is the X-flats frame, which is the frame I'm only using for the X-flats. So we can have a look at in my own panel here. I can show you the difference here. Simple. So in this panel here, from page 10 of 987 degrees centigrade, this is the real panel, which ends up on the final finished page. But then I'm using something called an X-flats frame, which, as you can see here, it's bigger than the final frame. And I'm doing this because I want the colors to cover, so that that the whole panel will be colored, right? And if I choose an X-flats frame like that, if I have an X-frame and then I import it, and then I do my conversion and all that, I do my work in Krita, and then when I come back, my X-flats will look like this. So here is my X-flats frame only, X-flats frame, and then the result coming back from Krita. And when I put these colors below the line art, there it is, it will look like this. And when I put my final frame over, it will look like this. So the final frame is here on the top. The line art is now on the top, and at the bottom we have the X-flats. So when the X-flats are nicely done like this, then I just can copy the X-flats layer down here to a color layer right above it, and start replacing those colors with other colors. And I can do different versions of that. I can copy that layer to next layer and do some new versions and test it out in another version, blah blah, like that. So this is the sort of the idea. Okay, so always have an X-flats frame. And what? Okay, so let's write that up. Use X-flats frame. So the idea is that with that there's something to be avoided when if we weren't having an X-flats frame. So why using a frame? Well, one thing for sure is that what we want is to sort of minimize the extent of the line art. So if we go back to the line art, if we're connecting the lines, so let's say we have the X-flats frame here, and the smaller I make my frame, the less lines I have to draw, because what I want to be doing is to manually draw on this. I want to make a copy of the line art, and I want to connect all the lines so that there are no spaces. And the closer, the more narrow I can make my frame or my border, my X-flats border line, the less work I have to do. So that's one thing. So that's just my observation. We have to ask comic book producers. We always have to minimize our work as much as possible and try all sorts of things that can save us time and money. But maybe not money, but time and effort and time and work. All right, so that's number one. So we should have an X-flats frame. Okay, so number two, the point number two is, and we were doing that before, I was talking about this before, that we want simply to connect our gaps. So I'll write this up here. Connect gaps. And this is of course especially important when we're talking about like a modern style of drawing where you can have spaces between the lines. And I can show you this in my own drawing here. Here, for instance, when in his face, up here, just here at the height of the eyes, I have a tendency to leave this out because I like it. so this would have to be connected later on here somehow. And of course it's not that Krita is unable to do that in all cases. In some cases Krita can do it automatically, but the problem is that if you're dealing with different lengths of spaces and different constructions of lines, and if you have many lines, then Krita may fail. So the result may not be exactly what you wanted. And of course you can tweak. In Krita there are many parameters you can tweak, and you can fine adjust and blah 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 like that, for if you like on an individual basis. So if one panel you can go in doesn't work, then you can theoretically you can sort of play around with Krita and get everything to work nicely for that panel. But I don't want to work like that. I don't want to fine adjust things for Krita every time it doesn't work. So I rather spend time preparing my stuff before I go to Krita, and then I'm always assured that it will always work. And to this date I produced many panels. Right now all of the panels in UD11 here has been how many? Okay, so I've done something like 12 and a half pages or something. So we're talking about 15 panels a page, and times 12, 150 and 180 panels, and it always works so far. So I think that's a pretty good record, that I never adjust anything in Krita. I just do the same thing every time, and every time it works. So that's why I'm so fond of this system, that I take a little more time preparing every panel before I go to Krita, and then I know it will work. Okay, alright, so we are at number 2 then. We always have to connect the gaps. Alright, so that's simple. But then we have 2 interesting things here as well. And then what I also do is that I erase. Let's see, we can get a new brush here. 3, erase what do we erase? Not needed lines. And the question is, which lines are those that I don't need? Well, they're not needed for the coloring areas. They're not needed by Krita to produce color areas. That's what I mean here. So we should. So this is what I do, and there are different reasons why I do it. One reason why I do it is that because I want to clean up the line work, the X-flats line work. I want to clean it up so I easier can see if I have connected all the lines that should be connected. Because if you have many lines, and then it's sort of it may be harder to find the gaps that you really need to connect, because I don't want to be in a position where I forget one gap and then spend time exporting the file and then going to Krita and then applying the filter, and then I'm going to back again, and then when I come back again I see, okay, my goodness, it didn't work. There was something happening there, so the whole background went blue when the background should be 3 different colors instead. So I want to erase those lines that are not needed by Krita to create color areas. So for instance, if we go back to my line art here, what can we see? Oh, we can see up here, for instance, up here in the window in the upper left. If we zoom in on that, on those 2 lines here, those 2 lines are not needed by Krita. They are not connected in any way, and they are not supposed to be connected in any way, and there's no coloring intended here from my perspective. Of course, but this is one interesting point here, that these are reflections on the window here of the Jeep that Ron is the general here. He's coming out of. So my coloring scheme in this panel, at least, is that I'm having some light bluish white kind of thing for the Jeep window here. But I'm not intending to sort of do something really white here, because you could do that. Sometimes in older comics, at least in good old Donald Duck and things like that, I think we can see that they are sometimes, and even Tintin, I think he does that sometimes with mirrors and with some windows. So it could be an option, but I already know that for this panel I've already decided that I shouldn't have it, so I will be erasing it. I will be erasing them on the X-flats layer, not on the real layer. So we are on the, if you see in left in the I'm here now and on this layer, and I wouldn't do it, of course, on the real line art, because my line art is locked also, so because I don't want to take the risk of destroying it. Instead, I create a copy of this and I work on that, and then I erase it. So erase those lines that are not needed. So this was one of those lines that were not needed. Another example would be to, for instance, here, his eyes. I don't have any coloring scheme for those. The whole skin, everything is skin color here. His whole face is skin color. So I would, before I send it to Krita, I would produce the line art, and I can show you how I did it. I did it like that. This was my original X-flats line art. So I erased those, everything in the face except the contours, because I know I'm sort of, I have to see what I'm even before I color it, I have to decide what I should color. So that's interesting, perhaps, to see that I'm doing stuff manually, and it's very simple because I'm removing something. It's not that I'm sort of creating something artistically or anything. I just remove quickly with the pencil, just white on the pencil, and you go, and a big brush, and then it takes 3 seconds. Okay, so here then we should have two things on the first thing here is that, as I've been talking about here, because not used by Krita for generating color area. That's one type of lines that I'm erasing. So those lines that I know beforehand that are not going to be involved in the coloring, they're not used by Krita to make a color area. Those I erase. But then there is another type of line I also decide to erase, and that is those that are creating too many neighboring areas. That should be colored the same color. Now it's difficult to express this in short in writing, because the idea is, of course, that if I have a bunch of, let's say that a good example here is so this is on the merged line art. This is the original panel line art, if I may call it that, and this is the X-flats line art. And you can see I still have those exact same stars on the shoulder here. And the peculiar thing about these, or not peculiar, but the idea here is that these three neighboring stars will have the same color in the final production, the final comic book. Whatever the color they may be, they may be the same color. So they may be all red, or they may be all white, or they may be all blue, whatever it doesn't matter which color you choose in the end there, but from a designer perspective, I already know at this stage, when I'm doing my X-flats line art, I already know that all of these should be the same. It's not that one of them will be red and another one blue and another. That doesn't. It doesn't look like that, I think. If someone knows of such an example, you can put it in the comment. But otherwise, so what I'm saying here is that if I send this file here as it is to Krita, then what will happen? Well, the X-flats that will be produced is going to look like this. So you get 3 neighboring colors, and of course, since the whole idea of Krita is to produce different areas for each connected line, then each star will get its own area here. But that's not what I want, because I want all of them to be one area. And why is that important? Well, if you have many of those neighboring, if you have 10 or 15 or 20 or 50, then it will become a time-consuming thing in the end when I'm actually coloring. So because then I have to select everyone with the magic wand, and I have to click on each and one of them to color them. So that's the whole idea. So that I want to avoid that as soon in the early process here. And how do I avoid that? Well, in this case, it's easy. You just here, for instance, you can just make some white in between the stars here and connect them like that. I can do that now just for the fun of it. Let's just we have the pencil tool, and we make a D and an X here on the keyboard to get the white, and then we just do like that. So now we have a white area here that will only be one final area. So now that work is done. So I simplify it, because it's good that I can see these things. I have to learn to see these things before I'm exporting to Krita. And then, so I'm coloring in my mind here, so to speak, and I learn how to see the line art, how to see the X-flats line art, and try to spot any simplifications. And as the more I do this, the better I become, and the quicker I do it, and the more efficient the process goes. And that is so this is good, because this is learnable. I can learn this, but if you get problems with Krita, that's not always so easy to find the solutions to particular problems, perhaps. So I like to do it this way instead. So that's just one pointer, and so I think we have covered the erasing here pretty good. And then what could we do then? Another thing we should talk about is one of the most common problems with Krita, and that is the issue of, let's see, we have a D here and a B. I think we are on number 4. This is transparency. Transparency. And what is the problem with transparency? The problem is that it doesn't work always in Krita. And the problem with transparency is also that it's not always easily visible. So when you're doing, if you're doing, like when you're working with line art, maybe you're working with many layers, as I am, and you're combining backgrounds and foregrounds and like that, and then you end up with line art that has some transparency somewhere, but you may not easily see it. So what I always do is, to avoid this problem, is to always merge with a white background. Always merge with background. So whether you do this when you are, as I'm doing, you can do this in 2 ways. You can do it in when you are copying the real line art to make the X-flats line art layer. I think that's the most natural workflow. So if you do it then, always, so you take your line art, you take your sort of final line art. I'll show you here what I do. So I take the merged line art, my sort of final, this is what's going into the panel. So my panel frame, my panel border is this, right? And what I do is I just merge that line art. You see up here, for instance, there is some transparency there. So what I do then is I'm simply always having a white layer as my background here. Is always waiting. I always merge this with a lot of things, so it's very handy to always have a completely white, and that, so that I'm just doing solo on that layer. There's nothing there more, it's just white, and then I merge that with this line art and with the X-flats frame, which is up here, and those 3 will be my X-flats layer, which I now can do all the connected lines and remove all unnecessary lines. So I think that's a good rule, that you always try to avoid transparency and always merge with the background. But theoretically, of course, you can do that in a later stage. You can, perhaps you want to just make a quick copy of the normal line art make the X-flats line art, and then in just before you export it, you can merge it with the Ys. But I think that's a useful step, because if you don't, I have myself experienced many times that it just sort of hanged, like Krita was hanging, or it didn't show anything, or just peculiar. So I was very lucky to be inspired to search for the solution, and I found it, and then just like magic, everything just works when I merged the white. Right, so that's the number 4 then. And number 5 is of course also an important point here, that if you're doing it like me, that you're using the same document to both prepare the normal line art and to continue working with the colors later on when you get the X-flats back from Krita. Then of course it's very natural. So then you just save your document. So what I'm trying to express is that when you are exporting to Krita, it's not that you are making a selection and sort of cutting out like that. It's not like that. I mean, you could do that, but then you'll get the problem of how shall I get back this? How should I paste that thing back again so that it lines up perfectly with the line art that I had before? So instead what I do to avoid this sort of matching problem, I just take the whole document. I just select all the document for when I have my X-flats line art. Okay, so we are here now, X-flats line art. I'm just selecting all of it, and then I'm exporting, and then I'm going into Krita and modifying this picture to produce the color flats. And then I come back, then I just save in Krita the result, and then I double click that document to come back to Photoshop. And what I will see then is this same thing here as I'm having here, down here. So I get this document here, and maybe I can just even better do it like that so you see easier here. So all the white here and all the color is coming back from Krita, which means that everything fits perfectly. So I don't have to adjust it in horizontally or vertically or anything. It just pops in exactly at the same pixel distance from the corners or the sides. So that's perfect. So I guess then what we could say here then in number 5 is that let's 4 here and we have 5 here. Whoops, that's okay. So we have 5, and I hope we have 5. We should simply say select all. That's my select all for export. Export. Okay, good. That's that. And then number 6, when we are doing the export, I'm using always the, so when I'm, let's see if I'm here, I am at the X flats line art here. So when I think I'm ready, I've finished with that work, then I use save as, save for web. It's in my Creative Suite edition here. Save for web. And as you can see, you can't see much here now because there's a lot of white, and my I have this, let's see, it's too big now for this screen because okay, maybe it does. Okay, I can just do it like this here. Okay, so we have then the I took down the magnification a little bit to, I think it was 25% now, so we actually see the image here. So so what I do is I save it as a PNG8 to prepare it for Krita, and I deselect this checkbox here with transparency, so no transparency also here, and then I just click save, and then you will have see if I can and then you will have a let's see, a typical, I'll show you a typical panel here. So what I end up with in the, I won't do it now, but what I do, my sort of my go-to name here is that I say I name it the panel, the page 10 panel D3, and then I choose the name for X flats .png. So then I know exactly what this is for, and then I save it there, which I won't do now. But okay, so that's the basic procedure, and then we can sort of fix this, write this up here as well, and we have save as 6, save as PNG, save as PNG .png. It's in the Windows version. and then uncheck minus transparency in the checkbox. Transparency. Like that. I think that's that. So, okay, let's take some repetition. We can just, so we have a workflow here. So the basic workflow is Photoshop to Krita to Photoshop, and with Krita, being in Krita in less than, I don't know, less than 1 minute in Krita, or less than 2 minutes in Krita, or something like that. That's what we want. And then what we're doing in Photoshop then is that we're taking the line art, and depending on which type of line art you have, it can be more or less work. So if you have a lot of connected lines already, then it's not so much work. But if there are lots of gaps, then maybe you have to take a couple of minutes. But in any case, I think it's much more natural for an artist to draw than to if we compare with the traditional method for producing color flats, which is this selection tool, the lasso tool, the whether normal lasso tool or polygonal lasso tool, but it's more natural to fill in the lines with a brush than it is to start trying selecting an area with the lasso tool. That's at least my, and I think this method is much quicker anyway. So there's only, so it's sort of you get the more painting feeling by using this method as well. Right, so that's the workflow overview then. And then number 1, use the X-Flats frame to sort of have your border, and make the X-Flats frame bigger. Maybe I should bigger than the real frame, or the destination frame for your panel. So then you will have a little leeway also. That's also good. If you have a bigger X-Flat frame, then you have some margins. So let's say you have my final frame is this, but what if I wanted to? Let's say that I wanted to modify it a little bit. So maybe I wanted to make it a little bigger. I can, just for fun, I'm just dragging it out now, just not so much artistically. But then I would have a little leeway. So if I would make it a little bigger, I still would have the colors covering. So if I let's see if I have little, well, I can just do it with the X-Flats and so even if I make it a little bigger, I still could could cover it. So it's very good to have a little margin there, so for adjustments in the I mean, I really shouldn't be changing the panel width at this very late stage. That should really be done and before even I start painting my panel. But sometimes you are, as a sort of last step, you suddenly realize that, oh, you made some mistake or miscalculation, or in some regard perhaps there was one panel too much on one line, that the script didn't really work on the page as you thought it would. So then you had to maybe remove one of the panels on the row, and then instead so you may have started off with 4 panels on the row, but then when you removed there were only 3 left, and then you had to enlarge the ones that were left. So that's one scenario. Anyway, but you have some leeway now to do that. Okay, so that's to use the X-Splice frame, and then we connect the gaps between the line work for those lines that are supposed to be outlining the color areas that you want. And then we can erase those lines that are not needed. And those are of 2 types. These so there are lines that are not used by Krita for generating color areas, and then there are those lines that are used by Krita for generating color areas here to the right, but you don't want that, but there are too many of these areas, you think, because you know how you're going to color them. So there will be too many of these neighboring areas of the same color in the final artwork. So you will erase those lines now to build just one area instead. So another good example is, I'm going to show you another example here, if I can just find it, which is even more natural than the stars example. Let's see, we are on, take up my work, let's see, we are on page 10, I suppose. Oh, we can identify quickly here. We have, okay, well, can just hide this one perhaps, and then we will see. So this is one great example here where I have the space suit here with those lines. So this is 10B1. So let's take that up. 10B1. Page 10, finished panel B1 I have here. And this is how my panel B1 looks like. I produced the 4 X-flats PNG here, and then I took that and went into Krita, and then from Krita I created the file X-flats done PSD, and when I click on PSD here, I get this. So here we can see that I already knew that I wanted this whole area here, his upper body, to be one color, and then I took this other area here to be also just one area, and by doing so I saved a lot of work, and I also sort of forced myself to commit to coloring like that already at a very early stage, so I have no hesitation to do that. So when I go back and look at the panel itself, when I actually pasted it, or we can actually look at the X-flats just for fun here now. We look at the X-flats line art here to see what I did. As you see here, this is already prepared. So while the merged line art looked like this, I removed all of these lines here because I knew that his suit was going to be blue, and I should of course have taken away also the mid one here. I didn't do that. I did it like that. But still, the point remains that I knew this was going to be too many areas to click on later on, so I simplified it already here because I knew that it was going to be just one color area here. And the same with his eyes, but not for that reason, of course, but for the same reason. But so this is the same then example as the general here we were talking about before, that with his stars, that I should have done that already at an earlier stage, but I didn't. So then I had to do it manually down here instead. When I went I made my copy of the X-flats layer, and then I created this layer, the colors one layer here, where I made all of them the same, and this resulted in this total image here. So okay, so that's that one. Number 3, you should erase not needed lines. And we have number 4, avoid transparency and always merge with the background. That's a good thing to do. And then when you actually are exporting, you don't have to select all to do the exporting, but the point I was trying to make was simply that it is the whole selection, the whole visible document area that you are exporting, and that stays in Krita also. Krita doesn't change that. So when you have exported it from Krita later on, then it's still the same canvas size, still the same image size. So when we import it back again into Photoshop, the color flats will line up exactly with where you wanted them to be. So there's no manual adjustment in terms of nudging to the left or to the right or up or down, or trying to, and it's also in the same scale, right? So there's no there's no complications in that sense. Good. So that's number 5 again, and then number 6 is save as PNG and then take away the transparency, and then you are good to go. Alright, I think that pretty much sums it all up. And just a quick ad again here, let's not forget that we have Barry Riley as the main person here in the UD11, the 987 degrees centigrade, and it's going to be a very action ride, action drama. There's romance, there's intrigue, there is excitement, there is speed, there is battles and conflicts and lots of passion. So I hope you will check that out when it comes, and I hope you're having had a good time here together with us here, and see you next time. Bye bye.